Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Visit drjoelwade.com, scroll down, and click the Audible banner to get 2 free audiobooks and start your free Audible trial today.
You are now listening to the Mastering Happiness podcast with Dr. Joel Wade.
It's all the rage these days to be angry, yet venting anger is almost always less than useless. It's hurtful, unhealthy, and disconnects us from our higher brain functions. Let's explore this today. I'm Joel Wade, and welcome to my podcast. We see it everywhere, on TV, in movies, theater, most certainly in politics and any kind of maneuvering for power. Anything important often, at some point, is dramatically shown with a passionate expression of self-righteous anger. Just watching these displays by very important people, we can get the idea that without getting really mad, we're not really in the game, not really living. At least, not living authentically, not living deep down in the roots of life. But the truth is, getting really angry is not about truth or righteousness or authenticity. Getting really angry and venting our anger toward others is actually an extremely primitive act, useful for fending off a violent physical threat, which has very little use in today's world. When we're out of control with our anger, we also get defined by our anger. Our angry outbursts become the issue, and whatever was upsetting us in the first place gets completely lost in the focus on our anger. If you feel like you can't not react with anger, that's a clear sign to stop and give yourself some time to cool off before you talk about whatever the issue may be that triggered your anger. Once our heart rate goes above about 100 beats per minute, our higher brain function goes out the window, and we're pretty much in fight or flight mode. This is perfectly functional for dealing with a physical threat, but it's actually extremely rare for most of us these days to be faced with a physical threat. Rather, we're responding to something that annoys us with the same physical energy that's appropriate for a physical fight. In other words, venting our anger, for the most part these days, is completely dysfunctional. Almost in the same way that our appendix has little or no function to our physical well-being, powerful, threatening expressions of anger have very little or no function to our emotional well-being. Even with athletics, people mistakenly think that anger can fuel the intensity and power of performance. But getting angry during a game or event can actually undermine our performance in a big way. There's a fine edge that an athlete walks along the border of our higher brain function, which is more about human connection and safety, and the more primitive but higher energy sympathetic nervous system of fight or flight. You don't want to actually go full on into the fight or flight while competing. You want to ride the higher physical energy of that arousal without getting sucked into automatic primitive reactions. When an athlete is in the state of mind of peak performance, it can actually have a kind of serenity to it that comes with total focus and absorption with extremely well-honed skills. When we see an athlete lose it in a game, blowing up at referees, or fighting with opponents or teammates, it rarely coincides with victory. It's more a reflection of having lost that focus, getting drawn into worry, emotional reaction, or desperation. I'll have more to say about this in another podcast specifically on athletic excellence. The bottom line is, we often vent our anger because we believe we can afford to. If we truly understood how much it undermines trust, pushes people away, distracts from clear communication, interferes with effective problem solving, or, in the extreme, actually can be truly frightening or traumatizing, we would never allow ourselves the indulgence. This is not to say we shouldn't feel angry or express that we feel angry. I'm talking about venting anger, expressing the full intensity of the emotional charge regardless of the consequences, expressing hurtful statements, attacking another's character, calling names, blowing off steam, or worse yet, becoming physically destructive or abusive. There's a big difference between having a feeling and how we express that feeling. Just because you have a feeling doesn't mean you have a right to hurt somebody. Aristotle said, anyone can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, this is not easy. Some people believe that if you're not easy to anger, it's a sign that you're repressing your feelings, or being dishonest by not saying how you really feel, or building up such a backlog of unexpressed anger that one day it will blow. But this is bad philosophy of emotions. It's not how anger works. We aren't pneumatic devices that store up pressurized feelings. We don't need to blow off steam or get the feelings out. These concepts are based on the old mechanical processes that were prevalent over 100 years ago, where steam pressure was still central to locomotion and power, and so those processes came easily to mind. But we aren't steam engines. And we aren't computers either, which is the current popular but inaccurate analogy. We're living organisms that are largely guided by the habits we practice and develop over time. If you practice getting angry all the time, what happens is you'll become very good at getting angry all the time. The great Stoic philosopher Epictetus understood this thousands of years ago when he said, "Whenever you are angry, be assured that it is not only a present evil, but that you have increased a habit." Now, I also have to say that it is a good thing to know what you are feeling. Emotions are information. They tell you something about how you're being affected by a situation. And that information can be very, very important. Denying our emotions is not the alternative to being ruled by them unthinkingly. Emotions that are unacknowledged or denied can cause big trouble. A person who denies or avoids their feelings of anger will be less likely to sense when their personal boundaries are being crossed, and will be more vulnerable to intrusive behavior or even abuse. And the flow of emotions at times can give us the energy and motivation to take important action in the world. But emotions aren't wisdom, they aren't understanding, and they aren't reliable guides in and of themselves. An emotion that arises from a bad habit can feel just as compelling as an emotion that reflects something real and important. Without integrating and understanding, and without being in charge of and choosing when and how to appropriately express our emotions, they have the ability to literally lead a person to ruin. A little history. The philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau was very influential during the Enlightenment as a sort of counter-Enlightenment contrast. Rousseau's idea of mankind before civilization, the noble savage, was supposedly in harmony with his emotions, and those emotions guided him in idyllic fashion in a state of nature, unencumbered by the constructs of civilization, which Rousseau believed was the cause of much of mankind's suffering. Rousseau was absolutely wrong about our primitive nature. Primitive man was orders of magnitude more violent and cruel than today's civilization, harsh as it may seem to us now, and cruel as some people can be. The truth is, the Enlightenment principles that have enabled the creation of our modern civilization have also decreased our violence and increased our empathy to an almost miraculous degree. In modern psychology, Rousseau's ideas were formative for people like Wilhelm Reich, the psychologist and founder of character analysis, whose influence ran throughout popular psychology and the human potential movement, and popularized the practice of releasing the emotions as part of psychotherapy, in relationships, and in daily life. Back in the 1960s, the book The Intimate Enemy by George Bach encouraged people to get their anger out. Anger was seen as a sort of emotional sludge clogging up the pipes of relationship between people, and creating a kind of energetic stagnation within people. This is the pressure release model of the steam engine, which was central to Reich's theory relating to anger. But we know now that the kind of venting or releasing of anger that was so popular back in those days doesn't decrease the anger, it makes it stronger. And it intensifies all the detrimental health consequences of venting anger as well, which are significant. When I was in my 20s, I was intrigued by the work of Wilhelm Reich, which looked at how the expression and repression of emotions affect a person's physical body and satisfaction in life. I studied several of the emotional release schools of body psychotherapy that were inspired by Reich's work, and I personally got some good things from these, including a sense of ease in my own skin and a familiarity and comfort with my own emotions and those of my clients. But there were problems too. One thing that I noticed was that some of my clients and colleagues had a peculiar way of communicating with each other. They often yelled, they often called each other horrible things, and they often did this with a kind of fierceness that was hard to reconcile with their claims of love for one another. My wife and I, early on, vowed never to do this, never to do or say anything to deliberately hurt one another. And this simple yet solemn pact has served us very well for over 25 years. We of course get angry with each other from time to time, but we never attack the other with the intent to hurt them. The effect of this is to contain the anger to the specific focus of the anger, which is usually a misunderstanding or oversight. And so that's all we're angry about. It doesn't become a global and overwhelming issue of character or righteousness. This makes it much easier to solve the problem, apologize, or remedy the situation if need be, and get back to whatever else is on the agenda. If we were to indulge in purposefully hurtful name-calling, we'd add to the mix the anger at having been attacked, called names, or otherwise humiliated. Over time, such behavior takes its toll on a marriage, draining it of the love, joy, and trust that weaves the tapestry of a bond over time. Such vitriol frays the fibers of that tapestry and stains it with contempt. It takes a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative experience to make a successful marriage. When you realize that, it becomes very clear how damaging indulging in impulsive ad hominem attacks can be. Every attack, every breach of trust, every humiliation needs to be balanced with positive engagement, 5-fold. That's a tall order for even a small breach, much less the all-out rage attacks that some people think are acceptable. We now know that practicing the expression of impulsive anger doesn't make your relationship more loving and strong and healthy. It just makes you angrier, encourages contempt, and dissolves trust. So, what can you do if this is an issue for you? Start with your belief about expressing anger. If you believe that it's a good thing, or that you won't be yourself if you don't vent your anger, I want to challenge that belief. It's not a good thing. Not for your health, not for your relationships, not for the people you care about, not for your success. Venting anger can do great harm to all of these things. Anger often has a quality of self-righteousness, of justice, and that quality is a good sign that we're already falling off the edge, going out of our higher brain function into our more primitive protective system of fight or flight. If you start feeling like this, as soon as you can, remove yourself from the situation. It can help to think of pressing the pause button. Wait a bit. See if you can calm yourself. Take a walk. Breathe slowly. Back yourself out of the trap that your self-righteous feelings would put you in. Then, when you've gotten some distance from the intensity of the anger, think of what you need to say to communicate your feelings, and practice expressing it with clear words rather than intense emotional energy. The more you practice backing away from venting, the more those pathways in your brain will grow, and new habits can form over time. Here are a few bullet point actions to take if venting anger is an issue for you. Remind yourself that venting is not useful. It's just practicing getting angry, and we get good at whatever we practice. You can try procrastinating your expression of anger. Put it off for 15 minutes, then reevaluate what you want to do. Imagine you have a pause button, like a remote control on a video, and practice pressing your own pause button when you start to feel your anger coming on. Focus on the anger as a purely physical sensation, not a psychological one. This can give you more emotional distance, and it also acknowledges that there's often an almost automatic physical reaction, not a genuinely emotional, righteous, and justifiable one. Often our emotions are about what we think or feel will happen in the future. If I don't get angry now, I'll be taken advantage of later. Remind yourself that this is just a hypothesis. And staying in your higher brain function, decide what you want to do to be effective into the future. Think of what you want to accomplish here, rather than satisfying your immediate reaction. Don't get mad, get effective. Ask yourself, what am I teaching? What's the lesson I'm demonstrating to those who I might be influencing by this reaction? Kids, friends, co-workers, employees. Guilt and shame can intensify the episodes of anger. Learn from having crossed the line. Make amends for any damage your anger has caused, but don't keep shaming and berating yourself for it afterwards. Identify what triggers your anger. Keep track of any time you have an outburst of anger and see if you can identify what set you off. Then, see if you can begin to anticipate those triggers and come up with solutions for when you get thrown off. Things you can do to calm your system and redirect your anger toward more productive activities than venting. And have a way to remove yourself from the situation if you get too activated, so you can have some time and space to calm your system. This is a big issue, and thinking about it like this and practicing these skills is just a start. But it's an essential start, and then you can see if there's more help you need with this. Unrestrained anger, free-flowing expression of angry impulses, doesn't provide solutions. It creates bigger problems. It doesn't bring intimacy or honesty or trust. It destroys them. As tempting as it may be to join in the fray of angry voices, it's a much stronger position to contain and direct your anger toward productive aims. Better yet, take a few steps back from your anger and take in the blessings of the good people and the good fortune of your life. Look for what you have to be grateful for, and this can draw you back from getting sucked into the gravity well of anger. Looking at the big picture can transport a raging tempest into the small teapot where it belongs. Then, with perspective, you can decide what you want to do, instead of being forced into a destructive rage by your unrestrained emotions. A Master's Course in Happiness is a monthly, in-depth program to help you actively, purposefully, and effectively live a happier, more fulfilling life. This course is designed to teach you the skills and principles that you need to bring the best you have to offer, inside and out. Over the course of 12 months, we'll explore what I've found are many of the fundamentals of living well. Through audio, video, and written material, you're supported to learn and practice specific actions each month that will strengthen you, inspire you, and enable you to lean into life more fully. These are skills and principles for self-mastery across all the circumstances and personalities I have ever worked with for nearly 4 decades, based on solid research and experience. And right now, exclusively for my listeners, you can experience the Master's Course in Happiness at a great discount. Use promo code MH1, promo, in all capitals, to get this $467 course for only $295 today. Visit www.drjoelwade.com. That's drjoelwade.com now, and use promo code MH1promo to receive this amazing course for only $295. A Master's Course in Happiness is designed to give you the most powerful skills that I can offer in a course. It will give you the tools and knowledge to apply yourself fully to the mission of mastering yourself. That's www.drjoelwade.com, promo code MH1, promo, all in capitals.